Not every billionaire has the stamina, the dedication, the fire to become the most unpopular owner in sports. But not everyone's James Dolan, the dreaded owner of the New York Knicks. Introducing Reign of Error, a new podcast series that gives you courtside seats for the bench-clearing free-for-all of controversies and scandals that JD has brought on.
Are you embarrassed by this, Isaiah?
We're all embarrassed, yes.
Here's a guy who inherited a fortune and a basketball team. I mean, he could be playing golf. Instead, he's made it his hobby to consistently mismanage one of the most beloved franchises in pro sports.
Sell the Knicks.
Along the way, Dolan battles his own players, fans, celebrities, the media, politicians, even the Girl Scouts.
Absolutely shocking.
It's almost too bad to be true.
I'm like, really?
I'm David Green. Join me for Reign of Error as we ask the $6 billion question, why doesn't he just sell the team? Follow Reign of Error wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen early and ad-free on the Amazon Music or Wondery app.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring an in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to talk about Jaden Akins and AJ Hoggard and the return to the Michigan State Spartans. But before we begin, I just want to remind you that you can support the show. We appreciate it. And all you guys who support us are awesome. Namely, Ron Hill, who gave a very generous donation via Venmo. Kenneth Kramer, again, returned with another donation via PayPal. Thank you so much for the one-time gifts. You can also be a returning and recurring patron to the show through Patreon. You go to patreon.com/MSU Tifnots, or you just go to our page on the website, thefinalfoursnotontheschedule.com/support, and there you can find a way to link to either PayPal, Venmo, or Patreon. I'd like to recognize those who support us on a monthly recurring basis. Those at the Mateen Cleaves level, Bill Church, Brian O'Donnell, Chad Hickey. Also those at the Draymond Green level, Adam Walzak, Dan Rankin, Doug Robinson, James Denton, Jim L., Mark Reynolds, Michael Bosnick, Mike Huntoon, Paul Marsh, and Scott Driscoll, as well as all of you at the Scott Skiles level. Your support means the world to us. It also helps us keep the show going. And we're able to bring really great content like, Jay Billis, Robbie Hummel. I was joking. I don't even mention
Mike DeCourcy.
Mike DeCourcy, right? We've had assistant coaches. We plan to have more people on too here in the off season as we get things ramped up and geared up for our regular sort of schedule. We're running 15 to 20 shows a month. I think during the season, it's pretty busy. So this all helps us keep going. It's funny. I was talking, my daughter who described herself as having negative sports interest. And she was a captive listening to the Jay Billis episode 2 weeks ago. And she said, that was really good. It's the surprise that I had a good episode. But it's a really fantastic discussion. If you have not yet had the chance to listen to it, I'd highly recommend it. It was a very high level, very interesting discussion on the college, I think just the landscape of college athletics. And, if you've liked it, share it with your friends. I mean, I think it's a great way. You can do it through our podcast player, which is the easiest, or you can do it through YouTube. And you're not going to be disappointed. It's not going to be wasted time if you're a sports fan, I think. And even like my daughter, even if you're not a sports fan, but sort of interested in the politics and the economics of sort of where we are in the sport and just the landscape.
Yeah, not to oversell it, but because, our end of it was mostly just posing the questions and teeing Jay up. But there is, in my opinion, at least in terms of basketball and its impact on that sport, I don't think there's a single voice in America that I would rather listen to on the subjects of the portal and NIL, structural stuff that impacts the actual game we see on the court more than Jay Billis. He is and that's my opinion. Reasonable minds could differ, but I think he is the best positioned, most eloquent person there is in the game to speak to all of those issues, how they're working now, where they should be going prospectively. Mm-hmm. And it's because he sits at a unique intersection. He has as we talked about, a legal background, which really is, in my opinion, necessary to fully appreciate all the ramifications of a lot of these things that we're talking about.
Yep.
I'm not just saying that because I'm a lawyer. I think it's actually true.
No, I agree.
I'm not talking my book, as they say. I do think it's true because so much of what we're seeing is actually either a function of what's happened in courtrooms, or it is being done in response to what is anticipated might happen or would happen in courtrooms if certain issues were tested legally. So that's sometimes that aspect of things is what's missing from these discussions when you hear them talked about in the media. And Jay, having that background, can speak to that in a way that most media members can't. And then also add in the fact that he's the preeminent color guy, I think, in the sport. He's right there with Bill Rafferty, in my opinion. Very different styles, but he's right at the top. He's clearly ESPN's number one guy. There's no question. I guess if you still think Dick Vitale is, but Jay Billis is the guy. And he played at an extremely high level. So, and he's been on NCAA committees, rules committees, et cetera. So the competition committee. So this is a guy that sits at the nexus of a lot of different inputs into what's happening. And if I do say so myself, I think it's the best episode we've ever done, largely because of the guest. But I also think just the back and forth we had and the things that we got into and the detail was really something else. And I've said this to you, Eric, privately, and maybe to some other people too. I don't know if I've said it on the podcast. I think the main reason that I believe it's such a good episode is when these subjects come up and you hear Jay Billis talk about them in almost any other setting, it's in 20-second sound bites.
Right. Yeah.
Tops a minute. We had them for a little over an hour. And these subjects are so complex and so important that I think they really take a very thorough, long discussion to truly get at all the substance and all the nuance. And so I think our format, not having those kind of time limitations, really lent itself to getting a very thorough discussion of these issues. So yeah, I second what you said. Anybody listening to this, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I really think you should, because Jay is speaking to so many things that are impacting the game in very, very profound ways. And you can debate whether you think those are positive or negative outcomes, as he admits, but I don't think you can debate how important they are.
Yep. No, I think so too. And I think the advantage, of course, too, with you as an attorney is that you guys can, without getting into the weeds to legalese or anything like that, it was certainly not something that'd be difficult to follow.
I don't think we got, well, no, I don't. One, did you? I don't think we got too deep, right?
No, I don't think so. I think you mentioned 2 court cases, which just in passing, but outside of that, there's really nothing there that the average person couldn't follow.
O'Bannon.
Yeah.
And everybody knows Ed O'Bannon because Ed O'Bannon played basketball at UCLA and is the guy who's pretty much responsible for killing the EA Sports video games, the college football and college basketball games, which are, at least football is coming back next year. Yeah. And not an accident after the O'Bannon case had been sorted out. So yeah, you're right. We kept it out of that, but that's why I was saying, that's one of the reasons why I was saying, if you don't have an attorney's background, it can sometimes be more difficult to keep all of this stuff organized and sorted out.
Right.
For me, when, just as an example, when in the part of that episode where I asked him, did he agree with my position that not only is an employment construct inevitable, but I think it's also the answer to this current instability that everybody's up in arms about with the portal. I think that kind of construct is the answer to sorting that out and bringing back some structure. And Jay thankfully agreed with me on that. But when you think about these things as an attorney, I can say it's an inevitability because to me, knowing a little bit, I'm not a labor attorney, but I know a little bit about how it works. And I look at the reality of college sports. It seems obvious to me that that's what it should be. And so when I see that, and I have that understanding, and other attorneys, I'm sure will know what I'm talking about. You know, when I was in law school, just a quick aside, and then we can get to real business here. I took a sports law class my third year, which was fun. And I had already taken antitrust, which put me about 90% of the way there, thankfully. So it was a real breeze because I already understood most of the stuff. But this is the early edging into mid 90s. And we spent time talking about the NFL draft. Now, at the time, our older listeners will remember the NFL did not have an early entry option. Basketball's had it forever, but football didn't have it. The NFL said you got to complete, your college eligibility before you're eligible for the draft,
right?
Or 4 years, whatever the hell it was. And it was clear, it was obvious when you read the case law that would not withstand a legal challenge. The only question was what plaintiff is going to do it, because with the speed or lack thereof of the court system, if somebody filed as a sophomore, they completed their sophomore year and they wanted to play in the NFL, by the time the case came to trial, they were already eligible for the draft. Right?
Yeah.
So nobody would see it through. Well, eventually, several years after I graduated law school, Maurice Claret came along.
Right.
And there went from a legal, but it was clear to us reading the case law that, yeah, this is what's going to happen if anybody tests it. This rule will go. And I'm not going to bother you with the details as to why, but it was just very, very obvious. Same thing applies here with employment. So that's why I'm not trying to toot my own horn as an attorney. Oh, you can't understand it unless you've got my background. But it does really help, because most of the time when these things get discussed in media, you don't have attorneys involved, or at least a lot of the time, you don't have anyone with a legal background. And so they're often not quite as well versed in the reasons why some of these things are unfolding the way they are. And Jay obviously does not suffer from that problem. So anyway.
Yeah, right. Well, and again,
past. Let's move on to the future.
Right, exactly. So again, I'd recommend if you have not listened, obviously listen, please share with your friends. Go to your podcast player right now, pause for a second, and give us a 5-star written review. Those are worth a lot. And if you do, you can send a picture screenshot of it to me at eric@tffinots.com. I still have some $5 gift cards for Nudge Printing. I'll send those along to you so you can get some cool Nudge gear. And then if you're interested, again, Patreon, you can certainly go to Patreon and sign up. We also have other opportunities for sponsorship for the show, because we want to make the show continue to grow, and that's what we're up to right now. But let's talk about the big news that happened today. Not too surprising. The deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft with the evaluation period was, I think, tomorrow, and we're recording this May 31st. So
it's midnight tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, midnight tonight. Yeah. So Jaden Akins, AJ Hoggard announce, again, not surprisingly, that they are going to be returning to Michigan State for the 2023-2024 season. And I guess let's just talk about what that means for the team. I mean, obviously it's, two veterans returning. It's kind of obvious that they're going to be a better team, but why don't you go into sort of the process of what you've learned? I mean, I know I didn't hear exactly like what it was they found out at the draft, if anything. I don't know if anything that has been sort of reported on. I mean, what have you heard so far?
I think that the feedback was, and I haven't heard details. I don't know that I would, but I think the feedback was largely what was to be expected, that they both had some things to prove. Mm-hmm. In Jaden's case, I think they want to see him do more and show more of what he can do with the ball in his hands. They already know he's an effective spot up shooter. They know he can guard people. They know he can rebound, but can he execute with the ball in his hands, not just for himself, but for others? Can he run an offense in the half court? Those types of things. With AJ, I think it's consistency. and obviously showing improved jump shooting would be helpful too. But I happen to think the bigger thing there is consistency. So I would expect that's largely what they heard. We've touched on this before, but I just do want to say people need to understand that we are in a different era. Do not take this stuff for granted. I think a lot of people looked at this, and I'm not talking so much about AJ, I'm talking more about Jaden Akins. I said, well, guys always come back at MSU. And, Jaden has obviously not done enough to be a pro. And MSU is just a great situation. He started, he played 30 plus minutes a game. He got plenty of shots. Obviously he's going to come back. None of that was obvious. None of it. Because of what I just mentioned. There were, and you can choose not to believe this. Doesn't matter to me. I'm just telling you what I know to be the truth. There were real concerns, not from MSU, but on his part, his family, etc., about whether MSU was the right situation, particularly once Tyson Walker decided to return, for Jaden to maximize the development that he needed to make in order to be a pro. And what that means is play more with the ball in his hands. Mm-hmm. Be the pick and roll guy and pick and roll consistently. Be the guy making decisions. He had not had a lot of opportunities to do that. He saw more of them later in the season and in the tournament. And I think that's a preview of what you're going to see next year. My understanding is what all of these guys have been told is do not expect MSU to run it back next year exactly the same way with those three guys. Yes, all three starters are returning, but they won't play exactly the same way. First of all, Michigan State hopes to run a lot more because their depth is vastly improved. They should be able to do that. So that's going to change some things. But also, I expect Jaden Akins to be utilized more as an on-ball guy than more strictly off-ball the way he was last season, which means that Tyson Walker will probably play on-ball a little less than he did. They will use him as a spot-up shooter more than they did this season. And that's not just, we want to showcase guys. But that's always part of it. You're naive if you don't believe that part of it is, hey, we're going to give you opportunities to be seen doing the things the NBA wants to see you do. That is part of every program's recruiting approach. It just is. And so part of it is that, but I think part of it is that Michigan State believes that's what will make this team better. That's another gear they can get to. And so I really think, and I've seen people make these comparisons, I absolutely agree with them. Michigan State next year, I expect that backcourt to look a whole hell of a lot the way Baylor's did a couple of years ago, winning the national title, where you had those three guards and they were all kind of interchangeable, in terms of, okay, who's on ball this possession or this part of this possession, who's looking to make a play. It would vary because they were all really good at it, and it made it a bitch to defend. Well, putting the ball in Jaden Akins' hands and using him more, and of course him doing that efficiently, will make Michigan State a lot harder to guard. And that is the plan. So I expect to see Jaden Akins with the ball in his hand a lot more. And look, we have touched on this. When Jaden Akins was recruited, that's what the game plan was. Right. The game plan was he was going to be on ball.
Maybe a point guard, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. That was before AJ Hoggard had even played a second for Michigan State. Never mind proven that he was capable of being a high-level player. It was before anybody in East Lansing had ever heard of Tyson Walker. So things changed as the roster evolved. And the other thing, too, which is worth mentioning, is I think you would have seen Jaden play on ball more this past season had he not had the injury problems. Right. I think that also limited his progression a little bit. So it's not surprising that by the time we got to March and he'd had more time under his belt to get reacclimated, you started to actually see him do more of those things. It took a little longer than it would have otherwise. But next year, that's what I think is coming. And look, people can talk about whatever other guard combinations they want, and they will. People will hype Duke's guards to death because the Proctor kid came back, Jeremy Roach came back, and they're really good. I'm not saying they aren't. But what I am saying is, in terms of what guys are going to be able to do on the court next season as college basketball players, I will take Michigan State's guards. You can, and I'm also including Jeremy Fears and Trey Holloman in that group, and also Garrett Norman and perhaps Cohen Carr as well, as wing reserves, let's say. I will take Michigan State's group, and you can have anybody else's in the country you want. And I'm not trading Michigan State for anybody else.
Yeah.
I think they will have the best backcourt in the nation, bar none. And it's the main reason why you're going to see them consistently in preseason top fives. And it's why I think they have an outstanding chance to get to Tom Izzo's 9th Final Four and win his 2nd national championship. It's the talent, but it's also the experience, but then not just the experience, but the experience of playing together. Those 3 guys have played a lot of basketball together. I mean, collectively, that threesome has played it's probably about 75-ish games together.
It's probably about right.
I think. Yeah, because Akins is 2 years. Walker's got 2 years. And so Hoggard, they played 2 years together. And I would guess at least half of those, they probably started together. That's in modern college basketball. That's like it used to be running out there with 3 fifth-year seniors.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. They are going to have a distinct advantage in knowing how to play with each other. And that matters. Now, how much does it matter? We can debate that. But when you add that to their obvious talent and their overall experience just in playing the game of basketball, a 5th-year senior, a 4th-year guy, and a 3rd-year guy, that's a lot of good stuff. And then you're adding in Trey Holloman is a sophomore who should be better. Jeremy Fears, who, by the way, it was announced today, has been invited to the Team USA under-19 camp for the under-19 World Championships this summer. And he is a Team USA stalwart. So although there are a lot of guys and a lot of very good guys who have been invited, I'm going to kind of be surprised if Jeremy Fears doesn't make that team. The only downside to that is it means he's going to be off campus for a while this summer. But when it's playing for your country, I think everybody will understand that. But you're adding him to that mix, right? You're adding him to that mix, and then 2 guys in Norman and Carr who, sky's the limit. It's exciting. It's fun.
So before we get talking about Hoggard, I just want to ask another question about Akins. So we always talk about playing the pick and roll, how can he facilitate, and roles you can imagine him trying to do at the next level, right? I mean, that's as his size. He's obviously not going to be playing the 3 in the NBA at his site. Do you see him, if we have more of running this season, do you think that's also important for people to see that explosiveness, the ability to get to the rim and attack, on the break, which he did a little bit of last year. I mean, there were times, but for the most part, there wasn't as much break for the Michigan State this last year to begin with. And then also he was injured for half the season.
I think he showed enough of that he is a finisher in transition. He had some highlight reel dunks. I don't think anybody questions that. I think what they would like to see is more of what we saw a little bit in the tournament, which was him showing that athleticism and ability to finish off the dribble in the half court. That's what I think they want to see more of. And I think he's got that in his game for sure. Again, we saw it more often late. So I think as he gets more comfortable playing that kind of role, you're going to see it. But, Yeah, I think in transition, well, what might be interesting is maybe he can show a little bit more, but he can be in the facilitator role in transition.
Right. Yeah.
You know, because last year, pretty much he was running the wing.
Yeah. Right.
You might see him more in the middle of the floor. And that matters too, because, you know, the NBA, obviously they love guys who can play that role and then just go ahead in the middle of the floor and finish a play themselves. You know, you think about guys like Derrick Rose or De'Aaron Fox now currently has that, Ja Morant, those kind of players. And Jaden, I'm not comparing him to those guys yet, but athletically there's some comparisons.
Sure.
So, yeah.
It's funny because I was, talking about AJ Hoggard now. Last year, there was definitely some question whether he'd return to Michigan State just because of, just because sort of I don't want to say personal issues, but just other things that not related to the game so much, whether he was, whether he felt Michigan State was the right fit or whether he could sort of work with the coaching staff. That seems to have largely been resolved, right?
More importantly, vice versa.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Anyway.
Michigan State, right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And, so he's returning, and there seemed little doubt that he was going to be coming back. And so it was for him.
Yeah.
I think there's probably an ounce of doubt in people that, with Jaden's athleticism, maybe he convinced someone in the late second round that they would want to commit to drafting him.
I agree.
Whereas AJ, there's really not, I don't think there's any really chance that would happen. And so for him, it's, I guess, you mentioned before, probably his shooting and his consistency. Do you think that's really pretty much all he has to do? And that's, and then I guess him coming back is obviously huge. I mean, for where he started a couple of years ago to where he's become, the importance in the team where he is now, is, unmistakable. And so I don't know.
It's been a journey. Look, I'm not going to, I've long since put away my NBA scout hat. That's the clipboard is deep in the closet.
You broke it over your knee like Izzo, right?
Yeah, like Izzo. Yeah, so I'm not even going to guess. Jaden Akins, you obviously see it because anytime a guy has that kind of athletic ability combined with the ability to shoot, you'd say, okay, well, that's a guy that would seem to have some pro potential.
Mm-hmm.
With AJ, it's harder because he has not yet proven to be even a good shooter. I think he got to okay last year, and he's not a great athlete, but what he does have is he has exceptional passing ability, and he's got really good size and strength for the position. So that part of it, he's 6'4" and he's strong. That part of it, you say, okay, maybe. I just don't know. I don't know where it all comes together for him. And look, you need look no further than one of the two teams that's going to be playing for the NBA title this year and how many guys they have on that roster who were undrafted. If you would have told me that Duncan Robinson would sign a $40 million contract the way he did a year or two ago and be playing a real role for a team in the NBA finals, I would have said you were out of your mind. And the funny thing is, it's not as if he suddenly discovered how to guard someone. He's still a terrible defender.
Mm-hmm.
Awful. One of the worst to come through the Big Ten. He is a terrible defensive player. But in the NBA, sometimes a guy has a specific skill set that just works and is important for that team, and it makes sense, and he becomes invaluable for them. And that is the case for him. So AJ Hoggard, could he find his way into an NBA role down the line? Yeah. I mean, anytime you become a player who's been good enough to be, selected to the all region team in the NCAA tournament, which he was, you'd be foolish to say, oh, he has no chance. But right. I don't, to my admittedly unexpert eye, he has a far less obvious chance than Jaden Akins would have. But who knows?
Yeah.
I'm less concerned with, I mean, for his sake, I hope it happens, obviously, as I want to see Michigan State guys do well. But none of that has any impact on what I think about him next year for Michigan State, which is really what I care about most at this stage.
Right. I always look back to Eric Snow, who I thought was a good player at Michigan State. He was super quick. I mean, I don't remember. I'll admit I don't remember how athletic he was. I mean, he was really
extremely.
But he was not large. And I never would have guessed. I would never guess that he'd have a long career, especially a long career in the NBA. And he couldn't shoot.
Here's the thing. If you were looking at that backcourt, Eric Snow, by the time he was a senior, was a very good college basketball player. But if you had put it in front of 100 basketball evaluators, so I'm talking scouts, GMs, coaches, and said, hey, which one of these two guys is going to have the longer career, Sean Respert or Eric Snow? Now, look, Sean, it was injuries and health, and there were things that contributed to that. But even if Sean had been perfectly healthy, I'm not sure he would have had a longer or better career than Eric Snow ended up having. Eric Snow was a starting point guard in an NBA Finals.
Yeah, like 13 years after he joined the league or something.
He was an incredible defensive player. And, it goes to show you, you can't think that you know more. Because here's the thing, the NBA guys themselves often don't know.
Well, right. These are undrafted players.
Why would half the Miami Heat's roster have been undrafted?
Exactly.
Now,
right.
that also means, by the way, Miami didn't get to draft them either. So
right. Yeah.
Let's not pretend, Miami was geniuses. Yes, they obviously know what they're doing as an organization, but they didn't draft those guys either.
Yeah.
So mistakes get made all the time. So I don't know what the long term is for AJ Hoggard. I know that there are certain things, his ability to pass, his ability to get by people and finish, which tells me he's a good enough athlete, and his size for the position, I think, are all positives. Beyond that, and the fact that he will have gone through 4 years where he's had to be accountable. And we've seen him be held accountable. That doesn't hurt. If
right.
you think that NBA teams don't care about that stuff, you're wrong. They do. It's not just talk. I mean, all else being equal, a kid who went through a program like Michigan State's is probably going to have that little bit of a tiebreaker advantage because they know that somebody who went through it for that many years has at least had to be accountable.
Right. Well, I haven't, I don't think I've told this story. So this kind of changed the subject a little bit, but when I was in medical school, my wife is also, she's a pediatrician. And so we were talking one day and about, she was pretty much going to be pediatrics the whole time. There's no doubt about it. And that's actually kind of funny that everyone would meet her and say, you're going to be a pediatrician. And she's no. And of course she ended up going to pediatrics just because it fit her personality. Right. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do as far as, especially afterwards. And I was thinking ER. And then we had a required rotation for anesthesia. And I came home one day, we married about 6 months or so. And I said, that anesthesia is pretty fun. I think that's what I want to do. And she burst out laughing because she thought for sure I was joking. It was the most boring rotation for her. She couldn't imagine a worse specialty, but I thought it was really fun. And so I've had a passion for it despite other people not having a passion for it. And I only mention that because we've advertised a long time and talked about the brothers who just do gutters. Now they just do gutters. It's not very exciting.
That's a great segue.
It's not an exciting thing, but to be really great at what you do, you have to have a passion for it. It doesn't mean everyone else has to have a passion for it. Just you do. I talked to Kurt and I've talked to Greg, who's brothers that just do gutters out in Detroit. And those guys truly have a passion for doing really high quality gutter work. It's not something that a lot of people think about, but there's someone who's making zippers somewhere. There's someone who's, picking up the trash. The people who have a passion for what they do, those are the people you hire for jobs, right? You want to get the guy who loves plumbing, the guy who loves putting in driveways. And that, with tradespeople, you want people who have a passion and meticulous attention to detail who are going to make sure they do things the right way. That's why we have been very excited to have the Brothers that Just Do Gutters advertising show, even though it seems kind of strange a little bit for a basketball show to highlight people who install gutters. But they put in leaf guards, they replace and repair gutters. They work in just about any weather. I mean, I had the guys, they fixed up my house in February, which is like, I don't know, there could be a worse time of the year to actually do something because you don't know what you're going to get, whether you get rain or snow or some combination from day to day. They came out, they did a fantastic job, lots of different, selection for colors and things like that. And I don't have to worry about stupid leaves, which I hate. I've got one part of my walkout is like 3 stories high. There's no way I'm getting on a ladder. So having a leaf guard there, and now my garden, which is underneath it, isn't getting pounded with rain spilling over the side. It's wonderful. It's been a great thing. And so I would highly recommend the brothers Just Do Gutters. Before it was just in West Michigan, but now his compatriot in Greg over in Detroit, his entire region, which is the Metro Detroit area, was very large. So, those of you who are sort of feeling bad that you couldn't take advantage of this opportunity, now you too can have the brothers that Just Do Gutters take care of your gutter work. So you can look at the podcast, your app, you look at underneath, or you can go to YouTube and there'll be links there. You can go to either the Detroit or you can go to the West Side, the Grand Rapids area or Metro Detroit. You have links there to contact those guys and have them take care of you. 10% off if you mention Final Four. They will do a fantastic job. It is absolutely the season to get this sort of stuff done. So if you've been thinking about it or just even getting those stupid leaf guards in so you don't have to worry about clearing leaves, they're the place to go. All right. So we talked a little bit about AJ. You and Jaden, you've obviously gone into and discussed a little bit with just the team, but let's talk a little bit more broadly. We have Malik Hall coming back. We've got Tyson Walker. And of course, as a explanation, we will also have a more in-depth deep dive before the season starts, like we always do. But just broadly speaking, now we know the roster. We've got 4 incoming freshmen. We've got a top 6 by most accounts recruiting class, in addition to pretty much the same team coming back outside of Joey Hauser. What do you see as far as the team? You mentioned briefly about the Final Four, obviously possibility, national title, those sorts of things. But the team construction. What do you think about things as going forward now?
There is zero reason to be anything except incredibly optimistic. This team will have, I think, as much preseason hype as any, maybe since 17-18. I mean, I know that's hard to say because the 19-20 team was preseason number 1, right?
Right.
But that team wasn't quite, it didn't have the same depth that this one looks to have. I think this is a team that's going to really have people excited because it is a near perfect blend of the experienced guys who have done it, have been through the wars, have come out the other side. And now, after the way last season ended, I think those guys have to believe they know what it takes.
Right.
They had enough to take down a very solid USC team and an extremely good Marquette team, and then played a very good Kansas State team to the wire and could have easily won that game. And if they'd done that, who knows?
Yeah.
Those guys have to believe that they know what it takes now, but yet they're coming back a little bit pissed off, a little bit, knowing that, hey, there's more out there for us to get. So you've got that whole element, which you love having, but you're also adding really talented, really athletic young guys who I think provide exactly what this roster needed and didn't have last year. So it's you almost couldn't script it better if you were Tom Izzo, I don't think. The starting lineup for Michigan State will be, and I'm anticipating it will be Hoggard, Walker, Akins, Hall, and Sissoko. Right now, that's what I'd bet on.
Yeah.
Subject to change. But that's a decently athletic group. Not bad. But other than Akins, you don't have the kind of traditional Michigan State jump combo guy. Tyson Walker is really quick. Madi Sissoko moves pretty well for a big man, but they're not, we've gotten spoiled with how many guys you can run endless highlight reels of their dunks on over the years, right?
Yeah.
Well, enter Cohen Carr, and I think Moneyball is going to be crazy again this year, if for no other reason than people are going to want to see Cohen Carr put on a dunk show every night he plays.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, and I love Jeremy Fears. I think Jeremy Fears has a chance to be a great point guard and a great leader, like a chance to maybe be the kind of guy people talk about in very select company. I think he has that chance. We'll see whether he makes good on it. Xavier Booker obviously is the most highly ranked guy, 6'11", great athletically. He's got a skill set. Easy to see why people are excited about him. I think Garrett Norman is going to be a very good player. He's got a lot of physical tools, and he's got a skill set as well. But if you're asking me which freshman has the best chance to break through in a major way next year, right now, I would probably be inclined to put my money on Cohen Carr, in part because of what he is, and in part because of what Michigan State doesn't have coming back. Jeremy Fears is a great player, but Michigan State's got A.J. Hoggard. They've got Tyson Walker. They've got Jaden Akins. So, there's not as much of a need for 20 minutes of what Jeremy Fears does with those guys, right?
Yep.
They don't have anybody who does what Cohen Carr does at his size. They just don't. And watching him a couple times during the season on television, I think as long as he gets what they want from him defensively in the role he'll play, and I think there's reason to think that he will, as long as he gets that conceptually, man, I think he could be the X factor, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. Because I don't think, even though you look at where he's ranked, and over the course of last season, he generally seemed to rise. Like there were some recruiting services that ended up with him in the top 30.
Yeah.
So he got respect there. But I think I mentioned this on the podcast. I watched a McDonald's game, and there wasn't a single guy out there that popped off that screen the way Cohen Carr does to me.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody. I don't think the country is sufficiently prepared for what Cohen Carr could be. Now, I'm anxious to start hearing reports and talking to people who know once he gets up here. Right now, Xavier Booker got to camp, I think, yesterday or the day before, or got to school, I mean. Yeah, so he's the first guy to get to campus. The other guys should be showing up, I would think, over the next week or so. Mm-hmm. We'll start seeing them in Moneyball when that gears up in June. But I'm anxious to hear about how quickly he's acclimating to what they want from him, because if it happens reasonably fast, and I think it could, I don't think the college basketball world truly has an idea of what he is.
You wonder.
I said this. There's one more quick thought.
Yeah.
I said this today. We're talking about recruiting because it's worth mentioning one of MSU's recruiting targets in the 24 class, Jonathan Powell, surprisingly to me, committed to Xavier today. Oh. So he's off the table. And we were having that discussion on the Spartan Mag board about, what they might do. And there's lots of options. It's not a disaster by any means, especially with Kurt Tang already in the fold at that spot. But one of the things I mentioned looking at next year is, okay, you figure you're going to lose 3 guys from the perimeter group, the 3 starters, right? You figure they're all gone because we would expect Jaden would go pro next year. Yeah. Right now, I would not think AJ would do a 5th year. He could, but I wouldn't think he would. So you figured they've got 1 recruit already set. You figure they're going to need to add a couple more guys, be it from the high school ranks or the portal eventually. But as I mentioned, I said, I'm hesitant to say too much about Cohen Carr because if things break a certain way, I could see him being a one and done.
Oh, sure.
And that doesn't mean that I think he's going to play 30 minutes a game, but with what he has physically if he ends up playing like, say, a high teens kind of role in terms of minutes, which I think is possible, he could easily show enough. So,
Yeah.
So look out, college basketball world, because Cohen Carr, I think, is going to have a lot to say about what happens in the Big Ten and maybe what happens in the nation. I really do think he's just that kind of rare combination of skill set, mindset, and physical tools that can pop really early. So obviously, I'm sure you can tell, I'm a little bit excited about what he can be.
Well, you wonder on some level too, if it's a little surprising, because like you mentioned, you watch the guy play and you're like, how's this guy ranked so highly? But
it's unbelievable to me.
On some level too, you wonder if there's a little bit less attention paid to someone who finishes up their recruitment in the summer before their high school season. And so there's just a little less attention paid to him. And then they were a little slow getting around to watch him in AAU. He's not on the main circuit either. I don't think he was.
No, he was. That's the thing. No, he was.
Oh, he was. Okay.
You could say that about Garrett Norman.
Yeah. Right.
Say about Garrett Norman, but Cohen Carr played EYBL. He played at a prep school, plays a national schedule. He was there to be seen. Honestly, he got recruiting service bumps after he committed to Michigan State. He was rated, right now he's solidly a top 50 guy, I think, consensus wise. He was more of a top 100 guy when they offered him and got him committed. It's flabbergasting to me. I don't understand it. I don't know why, how people now I will admit, I didn't see him as a junior at all. So maybe he's really come a long way in terms of his shot, but I'm telling you, I watched him play a couple complete games. I'm not going to say he's going to remind anybody of Sean Respert, but he's got a decent looking release and it seems to go in enough that I don't think you look at him and say, well, that's a non-shooter.
Yeah.
I think he can be good enough. He looks to me to have a pretty good handle, and with the athleticism, I mean, in transition, he will be lethal. I think in the half court, he will be lethal, because I think he's also going to be a guy who should be very, very effective at second chance points. And then you look at the defensive end, and he is built for Michigan State. I mean, I look at him and I have visions of BJ Dawson all over again, where, you want him to guard a 1? Fine. You want him to guard a 5 on a switch? Fine. And everything in between. Yeah. It is amazing to me how you can look at a guy who's pretty highly ranked and say, I think he's a bit underrated. I believe that's very possibly what we're going to be saying as we get into next season. People are going to look at each other and say, how the hell was this guy only ranked 32nd? I really do think that.
The fun thing, of course, is that you're going to see in the Champions Class, you're going to see a matchup right away to see whether he belongs in the court with, the elite
Absolutely.
athletes. And if he is, you're like, okay, we're in for a ride. I mean, and in some respects, Mady Sissoko, he looked great. And I think, as much as people ragged on him throughout the year, I think he showed his worth and his value throughout the season too. I mean, he was certainly not
for sure
at the levels he was where he started the season with all the ballyhoo. But I guess, the other thing I was thinking about too, since we're going to just generally talk about the roster too, finally just about Malik Hall, he returns, and that sort of changes the dynamics of what the expectation was, I think, probably when Xavier Booker was coming in, because I know you had mentioned before that the Michigan State staff was looking at bringing in a 4 of somewhere with experience to at least, play backup or to be sort of holding the accountability. Yeah, exactly. Now you don't have that problem. Now you've got someone. Now you have Booker probably not even starting. And is that going to be okay? I mean, I guess we won't worry about whether it's okay with Booker and his people or whatever, but because he's definitely committed to this year. I don't think there's any question about that.
Look, here's the one thing I know about Tom Izzo, and again, this runs counter to a lot of Michigan basketball illiterate fan narrative, but it's the truth. Opportunities for freshmen are always there. He has said it about this group. He's already said this. Said, look, those guys could come in, and some of those guys could just play so well that they basically shove the upperclassmen aside. They will have the chance to do that. Now, I don't expect them to do that, but the chance will be there. And we have seen before, we saw it in a very limited sense, but still saw signs of it last season. Let's say last October. Who expected that Carson Cooper would be playing significant minutes in a Sweet 16 game?
He'd be the last you'd expect.
Right.
Yeah.
He did. Why did he? Because he proved he was ready for it. Xavier Tillman, I've said it before. I really liked Xavier Tillman as a high school player and recruit. I was very happy they got him. But for his freshman year, I figured he probably would redshirt because there were just so many upperclassmen. Forget Nick Ward and Jaron Jackson, the starters. I was thinking Ben Carter, Gavin Schilling, Kenny Goins. There just didn't seem to be an opportunity for Xavier to play. Yeah. What was happening by the end of the year? He was firmly in the rotation, right? Draymond Green, same deal. By the time that team got to the tournament, he was playing significant, super important minutes. Over and over again, we've seen this. Now, all of those guys I've mentioned were not major recruits the way that the current group is. You know, they weren't ranked where Xavier Booker is or even where Cohen Carr is. But the opportunities are going to be there. Xavier Booker has immense talent. His combination of athletic ability, his body mechanics, just the way he moves at his size is rare. He can shoot. That's a big positive. He's got great length. That's a big positive. But he needs to get stronger, and he needs to learn how to not just play hard, but play Tom Izzo hard. Mm-hmm. Now, the things he has said and the things people around him have said lead me to believe that a big part of the reason he is at Michigan State to begin with is they know what he needs to improve, and that's why they came here. So I would hope that if Xavier averages, 14 minutes a game, that's not going to be a controversy for that. I would hope that. That's my assumption, my default assumption coming in. Time will tell. I don't know that anybody expected Malik Hall to be back at this time last year, but here we are. But I think the chances are there. If Xavier Booker figures it out and his play on the court matches his potential, he will play. It's just that simple, so it's really up to him.
And what else is very simple is making your selection for what you want to do to get your Michigan State gear. I have a number of pieces, and as do you, Nudge Printing. They have been a longtime sponsor for the show. They are great supporters of Michigan State. Gabe and Brittany have been running Nudge Printing out of Michigan, so it's all Michigan-created gear out of Portland, Michigan, and super high-quality stuff, too. Screen-printed, durable, soft, breathable. I mean, I wore our gear, which you can get at the fireandfours.theschedule.com/merchandise. You can get either our logoed sweatshirt or, which now seems kind of hard to imagine wearing with 90 degrees, or t-shirt. You can get those there. Also, you can just go to Nudge Printing and get anything you want there. You can get 20% off by entering the in the coupon code Final4 at checkout. Again, that's one word, Final4. They have all kinds of Michigan State stuff. They've got all kinds of other schools in Michigan outside of the University of Michigan. So if your house divided, you've got a Central fan, you've got a Michigan State fan, you guys can both get your stuff. They've got stuff for football season. They've got some new logos, or I guess new designs they have for the season. One is a kind of a Gruff Sparty football, and they also have one that's the state of Michigan heading to the beach. So it's actually kind of cool with a little umbrella and stuff. So you can check that out. Again, it's nudgeprinting.com, Final4 at checkout for 20% off your purchase. And like I mentioned before, if you leave a 5-star written review and you take a screenshot of it, email it to me at eric@tiffnots.com. You can get a $5 gift card, which goes in, you can use with your 20% discount as well. And then finally, anything that you purchase on the merchandise for either our hoodies or the t-shirts with the Final Fours on the schedule, which is really cool logo. Actually, Coach Kelly wanted some, so he got some shirts too. all those proceeds go to us to support the show. So if you want, it's another way to support the show outside of just visiting our sponsors. Finally, before we close the show, I just wanted to briefly touch, of course, Michigan State gets Akins and Hoggard back. There are other schools waiting for players to make decisions and withdrawing from the draft. The big one in the Big Ten, and both literally and figuratively, is Zach Edey, right? And so with the Purdue Boilermaker, the last thing I saw, and this is before we recorded, that he was interested in some multi-year deal with an NBA, which I have two questions. One is, is he likely to get that? The second is, do people actually make deals with, can they have sort of be assured by other teams to get drafted, to get a multi-year deal before the draft happens? Because I don't know that you could 100% know that, they may find, someone may fall to their spot that they like more than you, right? I don't know how that works.
Well, you touch on the problem, and all the time you have guys upset where they say, well, so-and-so guaranteed us that they were going to pick us if we were there, and then they didn't. This is sometimes why supposed bad decisions get made. Now, look, all this stuff is trying to sort out, especially in the social media era, what's real in
right.
drafts up from agent propaganda is, good luck with that. I don't know. But honestly, this stuff is so complicated. I just over the last couple of days, Larry Brown, the former Pistons and pretty much everybody else head coach,
where hasn't he coached?
who I think is great, by the way. I think he's one of the best basketball minds in history. But he was on local sports radio here in Southeast Michigan and talking about the Pistons, blah, blah, blah. And of course, what comes up is, what about that infamous draft, the LeBron draft, where LeBron went 1, but the Pistons were sitting there at 2. Could have taken Carmelo Anthony, could have taken Dwayne Wade, could have taken Chris Bosh. Instead, took Darko Milicic.
Yeah.
Still won a title. Still went to 4 more Eastern Conference championships or better. Could have had Carmelo Anthony. And Larry Brown said then, I don't know if he said it back then, but he's maintained for a long time, and he reiterated it in this discussion, that he was told by Pistons management they were going to take Carmelo. That was his understanding. And then they took Darko instead. So that I only bring that up to illustrate that who the hell knows what the reality is, right? I have read the same things on social media that you just referenced about Edey looking for multi-year assurances. I wouldn't think that would be a problem if somebody is interested in drafting him, 2 years rather than why. That seems to me to be pretty. That's not a huge ask in the modern context, I don't think.
Yeah.
Supposedly, the other thing I've seen is that the expectation is that one's going to go right to the wire. So Purdue fans might be in for a long night, because that will be huge, figuratively and literally. If he comes back, they're going to be right there. Now, I personally, I'm going to be doing a lot of thinking between now and when we roll out our previews. I don't think it's a slam dunk that you pick Purdue over Michigan State to win the Big Ten next year, even with Edey. I don't think that at all. I don't think there was nearly as much separating those two teams by the end of the year, certainly, as the standings suggested. I mean, Purdue, long before they got by, I had this discussion with Jack Ebling last week, and I think he was a little more, said, Purdue at the Big Ten tournament rolled through everybody. I don't know, they rolled through everybody. They won it. But we talked about it here. They clearly down the back half of the Big Ten were leaking oil.
Yeah.
People had figured that out. They'd figured it out. And what they figured out was exactly what killed them in the tournament, So can Purdue solve that? I don't know, maybe. But regardless, I understand if Zach Edey comes back, they will be a preseason top 10 team at the least, maybe top 5, and they will be a favorite in the Big Ten. I acknowledge those things are completely fair. If he does not come back, I think they're still going to be a good team, and they might even be better equipped for a longer tournament run. Dare I say that? But I can feel
one game.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying even if you figure Edey comes back, are they going to be better? Are they going to be able to do more next year? Maybe, but that more might be, okay, they get to the round of 32.
Yeah, right.
We've talked about this enough. I think listeners know, I really have doubts about a team constructed the way they are constructed with a player like Zach Edey and March. I just do. I doubt that. I am skeptical. If they're playing those minutes with some combination of Caleb First and Trey Kaufman-Renn, are they more versatile? Can they do different things depending upon the opponent more easily? Yes, I would submit they might have a chance to do that. But anyway, it's a big, huge decision. There are other ones though. Illinois, last I checked, still waiting on Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty big difference for that team between having those guys and not having those guys. Rutgers got a big one back in Omarui is back. Last I had checked, Paul Mulcahy had not made his decision. I would think he comes back.
He'll be back.
Which will help Rutgers. Now, they've lost Cam Spencer to the portal, which I don't think we've talked about here, which was a big blow. But with those two guys back, I still think they've got a chance to be a tournament team for sure. And I think that's it. I saw Bryce Sensabaugh is staying in the draft from Ohio State. That was expected. So there were some other decisions around the league, but those are the big ones that are kind of still out there. And then, we're still in the middle of portal season. So It's not done yet. These teams are still adding guys, I think Michigan has like 9 scholarship players at the moment. You have to think they're going to add some people. I just don't know who it's going to be. Some of these other teams, I'm sure Illinois is still looking around for a point guard. God help if they don't find one.
Crazy for guard you to have trouble with that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Guard you. The other big decision, there is one other one. Chase Audige. I saw an indication saying he's maybe 50-50 to come back, which blows my mind.
That I thought it would be like 90-10 he's coming back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's a big one because if he comes back, I really like Northwestern. If he doesn't come back, I still think Northwestern's got enough that they can be dangerous in terms of maybe being a tournament team again. But Audige, you put Audige with Boo Buie, that's a big deal.
And I'll admit that I actually sort of hope that Zach Edey comes back, not because, I'm a huge Purdue fan, obviously. I can't stand him. But I like the thought of having maybe 2 number 1 seeds coming from the Big Ten. We have Michigan State and Purdue, and you have a real battle. Because I kind of think, not that it's ever easy in the Big Ten, but, assuming Michigan State stays healthy, I assume have the inside track if Zach Edey's not back with Purdue. I mean, you just never know until you watch the teams play and see how they gel and the transfers, et cetera. But it'd just be more fun, I think, having Zach Edey there. Because also I want to just try and get that guy. Although we only get one crack at him at Mackey, so maybe that's something I should hope for.
You're in an unfavorable setting. Look, I would like I'm with you in a sense. I would like the Big Ten to be very, very strong because I think it makes your team better going through those wars. And it also gives you more opportunities for meaningful wins, which helps you with seeding, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I'm with you with that. But that's the thing. We can, if you're a Michigan State fan, you're in an advantageous position because you can spin it any way you like because your team sets up really, really well for next year, no matter what happens.
Right.
If Edey's gone, you say, well, okay, the path to a Big Ten title is maybe a little easier. If he comes back, okay, we're going to get really tested. That's good for March. You don't have to be worrying about it so much, because I would never bet on Michigan State to win at Mackey. I mean, you'd have to have like a 2-20 team for me to feel good about a game at Mackey. But, I think, especially on a neutral floor, you play that Purdue team with Edey in the Big Ten tournament with what I think Michigan State's going to be this year, bring it on. Absolutely bring it on. Right now, I can tell you, and we haven't solidified this, so I reserve the right to change my mind, but I am inclined to think Michigan State is the legitimate Big Ten favorite right now. You call me biased or a slappy or whatever, drinking green Kool-Aid, all the other stupid ass cliches, but I think I could make a pretty good case for it. because these two teams are not the same. You know, Purdue doesn't add nearly what Michigan State does. And they're both bringing a lot back. And I didn't think by March, the difference between the two teams was very significant anyway. I really didn't. And March kind of told us that, you know. So
and this is not where you think Michigan State will win it, but it'll be actually someone else, right? So this is actually
no. I think this year,
like Indiana.
Whoever I pick, I'm actually going to think will win it. that much I can tell you, because it's going to be either Purdue or Michigan State.
Yeah, I
know that much. There are other good teams, like Ohio State's going to be really good. If Northwestern gets Audige back, I think they'll be pretty good. You know, there's some other good teams, but it's Purdue or MSU. They're clear cut the two best.
It's the Big Ten, right? There going to be dangerous games all the time, up and down the schedule, especially on the road, right? I mean, there's aren't going to outside of Minnesota and Penn State. There's probably not going to be a lot of easy games.
Penn State, I'm waiting to see. That's a giant question mark to me, because they've added a ton of guys, and some of them are interesting. And it's a new coach. He's been pretty successful at VCU. Right now you're going to pick them toward the bottom, but to me, they're the big unknown. It's kind of akin to Kansas State last year. Like, who the hell knows what you've got when you're bringing in like 10 new guys?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, playing in the catacomb out in State College.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll probably tie it up there. Again, just a reminder to you to support the show. You can go to the finalfoursnottheschedule.com/support. You can find ways to support us financially. If you're interested in advertising, you certainly get a hold of me as well at eric@tfffinance.com. Please visit our sponsors at nudgeprinting.com. You get 20% off your order, or at the brothers that just do gutters. They can at least, at a minimum, take care of your stupid leaf problem, which just about everywhere in Michigan you'd have leaf problems. So you can find out contact information in the podcast player or YouTube below. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.